千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. I want to ask everyone to focus on line 13 for just a moment. The form of the formless. So if you think about the form is that which has substance, that which is tangible, that which we can see and touch and feel. The material world, material things. The formless will be the intangible. Those will be feelings, emotions, thoughts, connections, relationships, friendship, love, dedication, commitment, devotion, and so on. So there's in the Tao, there's always an interplay. There's an interaction between the form and the formless. I want you to focus on this because this is really the essence of this chapter 14 that we're dealing with. The interplay between the form and the formless. So as we talk about this, as we go through this chapter, there's going to be three major takeaways. So I want to outline them for you now so you can anticipate and expect what the ideas, the important ideas are going to be. So form and formless, there's a, you will see this two-sided arrow pointing in both directions. That's because form can come from formless and then return to formless. So it can be from form to formless or formless from form. Either way, two directions, two-way streets, so to speak. So what are the three major points of chapter 14 that we derive out of it in terms of form and formless? Well, first, as we have already talked about when we spoke of generations of life, continuing on indefinitely, but individual life forms coming from nothingness of the Tao and returning to the Tao. So that's the first point. Everything, including life, that's form, all life has this physical entity, this physical manifestation that you and I see. It's our physical bodies. Everything, including life, originates from and eventually returns to the Tao. And the Tao is formless. So this is one important point from this chapter that bring together the concept of form with formless and how they're connected. Main point number 2, all the tangibles in the world, form, all the things, began as intangibles, formless, the formless in the mind. So think of that as all the inventions of the world began as ideas for the invention. So this is matching number one. Number one is the working of the Tao in the cosmos, in the universe, in this plane of existence. Life comes from nothingness. Number 2 is what happens in our world. We are microcosms of the Tao, and therefore we too create things out of the formless, intangible ideas in our brains, and we turn them into reality. We turn them into actual things that people can use, perhaps enjoy. So that's number 2. And also, as it applies to your life, if you will recall from 6th Patriarch Huineng, he said that self-nature, which is formless, can give rise to all dharmas, all manifestations in your life. And that definitely includes all the things that will come into your life. So this is an important second point about the connection between the tangibles and the intangibles, or form and formless. And number 3, the third major point that we'll touch on is at the very last part of this particular chapter, we'll talk about using the Tao of the ancients, which is, formless, it's the void, to manage the world of today. So the world of today, that is your life today, and that is the world in which we have to do things. And this follows a pattern. The pattern is that we start out with relatively few material resources. We accumulate until we have more. So we end up with many. And then with many comes along with complexity associated with having many resources. Therefore, we feel compelled to simplify. As we simplify, the more we let go, the more freedom we gain. So we begin to transcend having all the clutter in our lives to letting them go and getting closer to the essence, which eventually leads us to the Tao itself. So that's a universal pattern that I hope to illustrate with a story. So these are the three major things. And for each one, I want to use some examples to bring them to life. So for now, let's go back to the very last slide that we reviewed last time. And this was it. So because we have already seen the slide, now it'll just all come up all at once. And this basically talks about how everything comes from the Tao, everything returns to the Tao, so we're no different. We come from nothingness, we return to nothingness. Now this nothingness is not quite the same as oblivion. It's not, a complete lack of existence. It's the void. It's the void of infinite potentiality that we're a part of. So when we understand the great cycle of life, this trip to existence and the return trip, I would say, as you see in the very bottom bullet there, when we have a clear view of this, well, we should be very motivated to stop wasting time because frankly, our time here is rather limited. It's finite. This existence that we have, this connection that we share with one another, this time that we spend together, these are all precious gifts. Existence itself is a gift. All right, so I want to illustrate graphically, pictorially, this whole process about something coming out of nothing and then nothing returning, something returning back to nothing. So it's this very abstract section known as Dao Cosmology. So in that particular concept, everything is reduced to the level of symbols and meaning and abstractions, not actual things. So the first couple of concepts that you will see is Wu Ji produces Tai Ji. So Wu Ji is the original state, the nothingness, the void, without boundaries, without edges. It's just infinity. It produces Tai Ji, that's the ultimate, which is also the one. So I'm speaking symbolically. This is the Tao, the void, producing the one. And the one is also the Tao. Sometimes we call it that. So pretend for a moment that on the right-hand side of the slide, I have a pictorial representation for Wu Ji, or the Tao as nothingness, as the void. It's actually there. It's just that it's blank because that is the pictorial representation. So from that basis, from that foundation, we talk about existence arriving from the non-existence of the void, which is another way to say the Tao produces one, and which is in turn another way to say Wu Ji produces Tai Ji. So when we want to pictorially represent, graphically represent existence arising from the non-existence of the void, here's what we do. Here's what the ancient Chinese sages did. They have a circle to denote the oneness, the unity. And I set it a little bit below this slide because right above it, the space above it is the void. So this is the nothingness, this is the somethingness. And to make the point that when we go from here to here, that's actually a change. It's a change in the conceptual realm. These are just concepts. So these are not actual things. These are ideas. Then, to make sure that we understand this is what we're talking about, existence, the unity, the one. The ancient sages put a dot in the middle. So this is not unusual. They did that, for instance, in the pictograph for the sun, for the moon, for the concept of up or above, the concept of down or below. They always have a dot to denote this is what I'm talking about. So together, this symbol right here, a circle with a dot in the middle, this is not as commonly seen as the yin and yang symbol, especially in the West. But you will definitely come across it if you were to, for instance, travel to Taiwan. So in Guangdao, this is actually a symbol that is quite prevalent. You see it, you come across it in different places. And now you know what it means. The next step is more familiar. Tai Ji, this right here, produces yin and yang. That is, the oneness, the unity of Tai Ji will now begin to polarize into two sides. So in that process, we call it one produces two. That's a line from chapter 42 of the Daodejing. And when we say one produces two, well, symbolically represented with a line down the middle. Then differentiation, polarization, complementary duality. So when it's still static, we have two things. We have two dots representing this static, initial, primal state of yin and yang before it became the yin and yang symbol that we're familiar with. So the two halves having two means concepts like relativity. You know, one is relatively X than the other, relatively larger than the other, that's relatively smaller, relatively higher than the other, which is relatively lower. So comparisons and contrasts become possible. So just to emphasize, at this point, it's still a static duality. This is the primal state of the yin and yang symbol. And again, this is a symbol that is not commonly seen in the West, but if you were to travel to Asia, you will definitely come across it. So in Guangdao, this is also, this primal state of yin and yang is oftentimes used to represent Lao Mu, which is another name for the Tao. So let's go on now to the yin and yang symbol that's more familiar. So the next slide in Dao Cosmology is about not just the yin and yang symbol, but the interaction between the yin and the yang halves of the symbol. So let's go a little bit further, then we'll take our mid-meeting break. So the interaction graphically is denoted by the curvature between the two halves. So that's a design. The design element is meant to convey a sense of motion, interaction, change. And this is where we talk about the change, the movement as the third factor. So 2 produce 3. This means movement, motion, action, change in the physical world. And that interaction will in turn produce everything else. So you can think of, male, female interaction producing offspring. That's one way to think of it. We say the 3 produce all things. Symbolically, we use 八卦 to represent all things. And here you'll see the yin and yang symbol surrounded by the trigrams. So the trigrams are 3 lines that are either whole or broken, and they're in different combinations, showing the many different permutations that the combinations can produce. So there are 8 of them. That's because 2 times 2 times 2, 2 raised to the 3rd power is equal to 8. So this is the level of material representation, material manifestation in the physical realm. So it represents all the objects that we acquire and use in life. So this slide and the previous slide were the 2 slides that briefly encapsulate the Dao Cosmology. So what we have done so far is illustrating the Dao Cosmology, which also gives us some insights into the formulation of the Yin and Yang symbol. So you can see now that it began as something pretty simple, and then when you add a few elements here and there, that it becomes the symbol that we all know and love. The Yin and Yang symbol has had a profound and tremendous impact on the world. It's had a lot of influence, and that's the next slide. So first, I want to show everyone a symbol and then pause for a moment to ask if you recognize it, if you know where it is from. Here we go. As you can see, this symbol has the word Dharma in the middle. So it seems like it may be related to what we've been talking about recently, about for instance, the 6th patriarch Huineng talking about how, the self-nature is able to give rise, is able to produce all dharmas, meaning all manifestations. But this symbol is actually not related to the 6th patriarch. There's text at the bottom here that spells out what they mean by dharma, and what they mean is actually Department of Heuristics and Research on Material Applications. What is that? So let me pause for a moment to see if anyone recognizes the symbol or where it is from. And if you want to do a little research off a browser tab into Department of Heuristics and Research on Material Applications, feel free to do so. Okay, probably nobody recognizes this particular symbol. So let me share with everyone that this appears to be I Jing. It's actually not. This is from a science fiction television show. So that's a major hint there. And I'm wondering if anyone suddenly recalls what that show might be. Was popular quite some time ago. We don't hear too much about that show anymore, but it was definitely a landmark television series while it was on. So, Walt, you are correct. The show is lost. So this symbol was found by the characters in the show as they were, exploring the mysterious island. And they found that there was actually an organization, a mysterious organization, conducting all kinds of experiments. And that organization was divided into different departments, and each department had a different symbol, as you can see, and there were, 8 in all surrounding the octagon design that you see there. So that's definitely taken. That design, that inspiration is definitely taken from the Yin and Yang symbol, and subsequent to that, the I Ching. So this is all by way of saying that the ancient Chinese design actually exerted influence in some ways to American pop culture, so much as to make its way into a television show, a modern day science fiction television show. Interesting. So what about other ways that the yin and yang symbol has been of influence? Well, here's another one. Does anyone recognize that? Hopefully. It's a flag. Hopefully not just stating the obvious, but giving a hint as well. Tim, you are correct. This is the flag of South Korea. Walt, you should consider becoming a champion of Trivial Pursuit or Jeopardy. I'm thinking you are a truly knowledgeable individual. So yes, this is the national flag of South Korea. So having gone through the evolution of the yin and yang symbol, now it's easy for you to recognize that the circle in the middle is derived from the yin and yang symbol. The curvature there is exactly the same. And the trigrams that you see surrounding it, it's got 4 instead of 8, but the basic idea is the same. So for those who may want a closer look at the design, the actual flag looks like this. So bottom line, the yin and yang symbol has affected the world, not just in ancient times, but also modern times. This kind of fits in with the overall theme that we have today about using the Tao of the ancients to manage the affairs in the world today. So let's talk about the other way. We have seen how something comes out of nothing in Dao Cosmology. So what about what I call the return trip? So the return trip is characterized by this 3 to 2 to 1. So that sounds like a countdown, right, to the launching of a rocket. So what does that mean? How does that imply what we're talking about here? First, I have a little bit of animation, and then the rotation of the symbol comes to a stop to make the point that as you get older, motions, changes, actions in your life, in you, they all slow down. They slow down with age, and eventually they stop. They stop with death. Thus, the dynamic becomes the static. That is, what used to be you as a living individual, engaging in different actions, doing different things in life, well, you've reached the end of that life, so you are now the physical body that you inhabited before now becomes inactive. The dynamic becomes the static. Then complementary dualities combine into oneness. That is, just like actions, motions, movements come to a stop. You used to be a living being, you used to be a living individual, you had yin and yang everywhere in your life. So yang, for instance, could be activities, actions during the day. Yin could be the time for rest, recuperation, gathering energy at night. So you had this active resting cycle for your body. Now, your body no longer has that particular yin and yang duality. It is now only disintegrating and dissolving. Back to nature. So from the two to the one. Then from the one to zero. So I hope you just imagine with me that this oneness denoted by the circle and the dot, it disappears into a blankness. And the way that we would talk about it, the metaphor that I often used in the past is that the drop of water that represents you merges back into the cosmic ocean of non-existence. So the interesting thing is, consciousness prevails and consciousness continues. But overall, what we're talking about here, from nothingness to something, you, and then from you, the something that is you, back to nothingness, well, that's the very first point that I wanted to highlight for this chapter. Everything, including life, which is form, originates from and eventually returns to the formlessness of the Tao. So let's tackle the second one. Tangibles in the world began as intangibles. Or as Sixth Patriarch Huineng would say, the self-nature can give rise to all dharmas, to all manifestations. So let's see how chapter 14 would express that same concept. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.